Hello there once again, and welcome to The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues, and we welcome back Wesley Lane this week.
Yes, Wesley Lane and Karen Waddell are going to join us this week and talk about a new report that's just been issued by a special committee appointed by Governor Fallin to deal with an analysis of child deaths in Oklahoma, both within DHS custody and not in DHS custody. They've been working now about 6 months on this report, and it's just been issued. I think our viewers are going to find it very, very interesting, and in some parts tragic, but informative, and I think it does have some good prescriptions for improvements.
Should be an interesting show. Wesley Lane, Karen Waddell, today's guest on The Verdict. We'll be right back.
Positive Tomorrows is a school focused on serving the needs of homeless children, particularly in terms of education. Currently, about half of them are living in local homeless shelters.
I don't know where I live.
It's really important that they see us as a place where they can be a child and not have to worry about adult responsibilities.
My dad says he didn't go to school when he was a kid. I think he's just playing.
As I watch that child grow and change, I watch them be able to take on responsibility.
I would love to teach people.
About 5 years ago, Positive Tomorrows lost a significant part of federal grant funding. Thankfully, Chesapeake stepped forward with some significant funding.
These kids get lost in the crowd because they weren't given an opportunity to figure out who they were.
I'm gonna be a ballerina.
I know that we are making a difference in who they can become.
My great-great-grandfather, Cyrus Harris, came to Oklahoma Territory, Trail of Tears, and he served as the first governor of the Chickasaw Nation. I'm Harris Penner, and I own and operate Penner Ranch in Mill Creek, Oklahoma, and I'm Chickasaw. As far as the ranch and Cyrus Harris, my daughters will be the 5th generation on that land. They're the backbone, like the Chickasaw women have always been. They're the backbone of the place. It's been in the family all of my life, all of my grandfathers. My grandfather and my dad were both born on houses on that place. Today, the ranch is a cow-calf operation. The land, it means everything to us. We would never get rid of it. That's our roots, our heritage is right there. As far as Chickasaw heritage, I'm proud to be a Chickasaw, proud to be an Oklahoman.
And welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Today we're really pleased to welcome back to the set of The Verdict Wesley Lane. Wes has been on 7 additional times other than today. He's just a very frequent guest, and we're very pleased to have him. Wes did his undergraduate and his law work at the University of Oklahoma. He's a former Oklahoma County District Attorney, where he served with great honor and distinction and efficiency, I might add. He is a former chairman of the Department of Human Services Commission, where he likewise served with distinction. He is the president of the SALLT and Light Leadership Training, Inc. firm, where he provides motivational and spiritual training and leadership for folks. He's the chairman, and this is the reason we're inviting him back on today. He's the chairman of the Oklahoma Special Review Commission on Oklahoma DHS role in child abuse and neglect and in death cases. Wes, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again. As I said, I'm collecting enough cups now for a restaurant called The Verdict, and thrilled to be here to fill up my cupboard.
Well, as one of our former guests said, well, by now the verdict ought to be in.
Yeah.
So we're pretty close. To my left is Karen Waddell. Karen is president and CEO of the Lynn Institute. She did her undergraduate work at the University of Oklahoma. She has occupied various leadership positions in nonprofit organizations around the country, including in Florida. She has previously served as Associate Vice President and Director of the Executive Director of the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. She's a former member also of the Oklahoma DHS Commission, and she is a member of the commission that I just described, Wes chairing. So, Karen, welcome to The Verdict.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here. This is a lot of work. Wes and I represent 21 people who did a lot of work, and we're glad that it's done, aren't we, Wes?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's really just starting.
Let's get into the nitty-gritty, but first, Karen, you work at the Lynn Institute.
I do.
What does the Lynn Institute do?
The Lynn Institute is a clinical and medical research firm. We do clinical trials. We work with pharmaceuticals in 3 states and the FDA, and we will test medications, a lot of aging diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, etc. The public is invited to participate in these, and that testing then helps us take things to the marketplace.
Well, Wes, in the introduction we talked about the special committee that both you and Karen have served on or are serving on. How did your chairmanship of that come about, and what were you expected to do?
Well, if folks will remember, about 1.5 years ago, there was just almost every other day, it seemed like, the headlines in the paper were concerning the perceived chaos at DHS, child deaths, one thing or another, just a host of things. And so, Governor Fallon appointed me and Brad Yarbrough that summer to fill a couple of extra vacancies on the commission. And one of the things that she charged us with was to really to get to the bottom of some of the issues. And so, me, having been a former prosecutor, one of the big issues, in fact, what really sparked this examination and report was a press conference held by a couple of legislators alleging that some 50 children a year died at the hands of DHS. And so that naturally, I mean, how can you not examine that? And so the then chairman of the commission, Brad Yarbrough, gave me permission to form up this committee, one of whom, of course, one of the first people I went to was Karen Waddell. But we ultimately gathered about 20 people, all of whom brought something to the table. Sometimes they might have been experts, either as a medical doctor, a child abuse pediatric physician, or perhaps the director of the Oklahoma Health Sciences Center, Child Abuse and Neglect Center, or investigators. We had school officials, former hospital executives. We just had a broad coalition from the community, people who brought common sense, citizen, fresh look at these things. And we just looked. So did in fact, or is the way that DHS is conducting its business, putting these children at additional risk, and are in fact children dying? I mean, I'm telling you guys, it was very frequent. I would have people coming to me, just reporters or one thing or another, oh my gosh, is this true? And so a lot of angst was out there, and so that's what we started looking at.
How did you decide to become involved, Karen? I know this isn't necessarily what you do every day.
Well, it's not what I do every day, but it is my passion. These children are all of our children. This isn't DHS's problem. This isn't a state government problem. These kids are all of ours. And like so many of my fellow Oklahomans, you pick up every day, you see a newspaper article about these kids, and you're saying this can't be true. It just can't be like that, and what can we do to make it better? And there's a whole group of people in our state right now that are coming together saying we have got to take care of these kids. They're special. And I've been a long champion of foster kids. I worked in a big foster care program on the East Coast for a while. But this committee that came together worked for 18 months. We studied 135 cases. Not all of those cases were from child abuse and neglect. They were from all child deaths in a period of 2 years. And then we looked at specifically 35 cases that were child abuse and neglect deaths, but only one of those actually occurred while they were in foster care custody. And we reviewed every detail. This was very difficult work, wasn't it, Wes?
It really was. We spent a
very
lot
tough.
of time because the first thing we had to do was just actually get on page. I mean, we were supposed to be looking at DHS policies. So what were DHS policies? How do they even go about investigating a child death? What were the parameters that we were going to be looking at?
Yeah,
what
how
were
much
the questions?
discretion is built into the system? I would think that would be kind of fundamental.
Absolutely, because so what are the rules the people at DHS? So when they have a child coming into their care or a referral being made to them, what are the parameters, if you will, of how are they going to deal with these? In fact, the way that we set this up was we looked at all children beginning in January 2010 who had ever had a referral on them, that either had an active referral on them or that had been a referral for some reason for a year previous. And so essentially was DHS on notice about this child. They didn't have to have a kid in custody, but they just had to know about them. But the referrals could have easily come from services to the family because they're poor and they need some help.
Let me interrupt you just for a minute. By referral, you're talking about some communication to DHS that says you need
Somebody's
to look
made
into
a call.
this.
Exactly.
Okay.
Somebody's either made a call, or maybe a school official has noticed something about a child, or it could be just a host of different things. Or it might be that the family has sought some sort of help from the state to help in one shape, form, or fashion or other. It may have absolutely nothing to do with child abuse, but nonetheless, technically DHS knew about the family.
Okay.
What are the highlights of this report that you're releasing?
Well, one of the wonderful things that we had, one of the greatest decisions that I made was pulling Karen Waddell.
I was waiting for that.
That's right.
Speed dial is a problem.
Was speed dial with Karen Waddell. Because what we started, if you imagine this, we'd have a white board, and we had everybody with a list of questions. So as you're looking at a particular case or a case file, here are the questions that we're wanting each of us to be looking at. After we went through some training sessions to understand the nature of child abuse, neglect, and the like, but then we had to have someone who was actually very experienced at looking at the details, the information, collating that, putting that together into something that is this, and that would be Karen Waddell. And so Karen had a methodology, and
well, the cases, some of them really were that thick, and some were like this, and most of the people around the table had experience in doing different kinds of audits and continuing quality programs. But we really had to get very specific, so we had DHS people that came in and helped us understand those. Once we did, and we broke it down into, we actually came out with 37 findings, 12 implied findings, and 35 recommendations, which is the 38-page report. But the Cliff Notes version is this. First and foremost, we identified clearly there were not 50 children that died because of child abuse in any one given year. In fact, over a 10-year period, there weren't 50 children that died of those causes. So first and foremost, yes, there were deaths, there were not 50. Secondly, we found many times that DHS did things very well. We found times when that staff performed exemplary. We heard comments like, you know what, there's nothing anybody could have done. There's nothing you could have done differently. But then again, we found times that there were policy changes that DHS needed. There was maybe training that should have occurred. It was scheduled to occur. The person didn't get the training, and the tragedy occurred in the terrible week that it should have happened. It didn't happen, and then the worst occurs. Policies on training, policies on how the hotline was run, policies on how they identified child abuse in correlation to drug abuse in the home and drug violence over and over again. We found cases where there was prevalence of some kind of drug abuse, and drug abuse by itself is not a reason for removal of a child from a home necessarily. It can be, but it's not always. So, and domestic violence and how policies on how DHS responds to that. We found also, and overwhelmingly, and this is one of the things that Wes and I both jumped on, that there are many other agencies or people or entities that were responsible that touched these children or could have and should have and didn't necessarily. It wasn't always a DHS issue by itself. And the number of times that we found a community member, a neighbor, well, I saw that. I knew that child was being hit. We had one case where there was an apartment manager and an assistant apartment manager that several times observed and never picked up the phone and called and made the report. And we had a tragic outcome. So other agencies are involved. The other point would be that these families where these children are, they've been removed from that home, they have multiple issues. It's not just that they most of the times they love their children as much as you love yours and I love mine and my grandchildren. But so many times these families are they have lifestyle issues, they have quality of life issues, they're struggling financially, they don't have transportation, they don't have access to health care, they don't have access to mental health care. Lots of issues where we found incidences of undiagnosed mental health care.
I know we're at the heart of the issue here,
Yes.
but I need to get us to a break. We'll come back and pick it up right there.
Thank you.
We're studying a new report that specifically looked at DHS and an alarming number of stories that had surfaced about DHS over the last few years. This report should help shed some light on the accuracy of all of that information. We'll be right back on The Verdict.
When you have something important to communicate, it becomes clear that there's a lot of competition for your audience's attention. So how can your message stand out and actually resonate with your audience? Legal Graphics has the answers. The team at Legal Graphics will work with you to plan, design, and even test your presentation to ensure your message will be heard and remembered. Call Legal Graphics today to schedule an appointment. The readiness is all.
Hear that? It's the sound of an industry, 83,000 strong, creating jobs for nearly 350,000. A $52 billion a year being pumped into our economy. It's the sound of Oklahoma's oil and natural gas industry, our heart for the state, and our people. And it beats on and on and on.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Karen Waddell and Wes Lane are our guests this week on The Verdict. And when we went to a break, Karen was right in the midst of kind of explaining some of the big picture elements of this report that tries to illuminate some results of DHS's work over the last few years.
Well, the last overview piece would be the one about the home conditions that I was just mentioning. But it's both a sign of concern, but it was also a sign for our greatest hope, because at the end of this, the recommendations talk about how we can prevention is our greatest cure for this situation. But so many times we found even the home compositions, the family patterns are of concern. 57.2 of the incidences of child abuse in a home occur when you have an unmarried partner to the biological mother of the child or father of the child in the home. So you've got a single parent with a non-married person in the home who's trying to parent the child. That's when the majority of the incidences occur. 6.2 of those incidences only occur in a home where the child has both biological married parents intact.
So it's almost 10 times more likely to happen.
Right.
Yes.
By looking at the number. I looked at your chart and found it fascinating.
Right.
It was, did you say 6 point something,
Right.
and then 56 point something.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the big takeaways we got. We saw this as a very systemic deal, but then what became very, very rapidly apparent was that the numbers just keep flowing more and more. I remember when I was a district attorney talking to Howard Hendrick, former head of DHS, and asking him, Howard, how come the number of child welfare cases that I'm filing at the district attorney's office have nearly doubled over the last 8 years? And he said, what that is that is the result of the out of wedlock birth rate that is taking place, because all the statistics are reflecting. And in fact, there are people in disagreement, whether you're liberals or conservatives. There is a great unity on this, and that is that the safest place, if we're really interested in child safety, which I know we are, but if we are really interested in how do we really address the safety of these children, we're going to have to do something about the family structure upstream of DHS, because because they're coming in, and we can tweak DHS. We can train them till the cows come home. But if the numbers just keep flooding in, then it's just I mean, remember, this is the pool of our future criminals. These are the people that aren't going to be getting an education, that there is a high degree of despair and hopelessness in. I mean, if we don't address these things upstream of this by really examining, and specifically some of the things that Karen talks about, it may not be politically correct to say, you know, one of, not the only thing, but one of the things that would be very strongly protective of children over the next 20 years is if we were to have a culture in Oklahoma that recognizes, you know, marriage is very important and we need to do everything we can to support it, because that is where our children are safest.
One of the other things over and over again was the fact that this is all of our responsibility. And so churches and school groups and neighbors and civic groups that are wanting to help these families where these problems occur so often, they need support. They need mentoring. And so I think you're going to see come out of the recommendation sections, you see things like communities need to become more involved. You see things like we need to help DHS. They need to hire to a different standard when they're hiring people. There are specific identifications of areas where DHS can do some new ones. It was a big deal.
That was what Karen was just talking about right there, really, because I don't want you to think that we just start thinking, well, DHS isn't a problem. There were some distinct problems. I think that Karen and I in the committee are generally very upbeat at this point. I know I certainly am, because I'm seeing a lot of things happening. The new Pinnacle plan, the great work they're doing, because even some of the things that we talked about, Karen, like the hotline. The moment we started breathing this is a problem, they started tweaking it to fix it.
Deb Smith was on our committee from the Child Welfare Department, so she paid attention, she listened, and those corrections were made, or they're already made, but they're in the report.
We only got a minute left.
Yeah.
Once a child enters the foster system, is that child safer statistically than they were prior to entering the foster system?
Yes, they are. And they're going to be safer more in the future, I believe, because I think Oklahomans are ready to step up to the plate to help, and we have a lot of ways that they're going to be able to help now.
We have enormous support from the executive branch of government that was not necessarily evident, or it was probably there, but it wasn't as vocal or as active.
Yeah, they're very vocal now. Absolutely.
Governor Fallon is a big supporter.
The legislative branch, the executive branch. There is a fascinating collectivity of focus and common purpose right now. And some of the things that we're doing right now with the Count Me In for Kids thing and bringing solutions to the foster care system is a huge thing.
Count Me In for Kids is the collaborative, totally grassroots that's come up and said it's judges, it's public defenders, it's community leaders, and we're all coming together and saying we're going to come around DHS and these foster kids, and we're going to be a repository, a group where we can all get together and develop solutions.
Is this report going to be available online?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, DHS.
Okay, so we will give that website information in our last segment and invite people to stay tuned. But in the meantime, I want to thank you both for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
And for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you
Our
for
pleasure, our honor.
Absolutely. And I know this will get a lot of exposure, and the conversation will continue in your home and in our homes, and then we'll see where we go from here. But we certainly all want to take care of our kids. Kent and I will be back with the final word after this.
Good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
You have children come from a different lifestyle, different mindset. You have to open your arms and really do what you have to do to have that child become a part of your family. And if it's more patience, that's what you do. Kids gotta know they can trust you. And that's what we try to do with these kids.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers here. Karen Waddell and Wes Lane were our guests. And a very, I think, illuminating report on what alarmed us all. You know, a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we were starting to hear reports that DHS was broken. And I think the governor did the right thing in bringing in an outside group and say, you know, examine this. Obviously, we can do better. Everybody can do better. But you know, is it broken, and just how bad is it? Where are the facts? And I think this report's going to allow a lot of people to kind of get that information.
Well, it is, and the response of the day-to-day folks at DHS that are in the trenches every day working hard has just been just as exemplary as those in the political branch. They're trying their best in very difficult circumstances, and they withstood the criticism and the second guessing of what they had been doing, and put the bit in their teeth and are trying to do better and are doing better under the Pinnacle Plan and the leadership of Ed Lake and Deb Smith.
You can go to the Department of Human Services website and get the complete report for yourself and read it, but I want to personally thank both of them and the rest of their committee for all the work they put on it. We have a website too, theverdict.tv. Go there, log on, tell us about a guest you'd like to see on an upcoming edition of The Verdict. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next week.